Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Waterloo Council meeting for Monday, June 27th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. We'll begin this meeting with a roll call, please, beginning with Ward 1.
Good evening. Councillor Hanmer present.
Councillor Bodley present.
Councillor Veith present.
Councillor Freeman present.
Councillor Vasic present.
Councillor Henry present.
Councillor Bonigo present.
And the mayor's here too. We'll have a disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Since Councillor Freeman is back with us and already declared a conflict, perhaps you could just cover that again since it's the next item up.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Mayor. I'm just declaring a pecuniary interest as it relates to zoning bylaw, excuse me, zoning bylaw amendment application Z2202 for 70 King Street North related to my place of employment. And if it makes sense, Mayor, I'll leave the meeting right now and then wait for clerk's advice on when to return.
Absolutely. We'll give you a call back when that's required or email you. Thank you. So first up, we have a public meeting, formal public meeting. And if you'd like to speak at the planning meeting happening momentarily, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705 if you wish to be a delegate tonight. This is a formal public meeting to consider zoning bylaw amendment application Z2202 for 70 King Street North. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, Wendy Fisher, at 519-747-8544 or at wendy.fisher@waterloo.ca, and that's wendy.fisher@waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of this meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the KW Record on June 13th, 2022 and mailed or emailed on June 15th, 2022 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting held on February 28th, 2022, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you. As a reminder, if any person watching would like to receive further notice of this application, you can contact Wendy Fisher. I'll now call upon our planner, Wendy Fisher, to give us a brief presentation.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Mayor Jaworski, councillors, and any members of the public listening in. As noted, this is a formal public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment Z2202, which applies to 70 King Street North. The application is being advanced by HIP Post LP, represented here tonight by Trevor Hawkins of MHBC Planning, Joel Doherty of HIP Development, and Jason Martin of MSS Architects. Next slide, please. The subject property is located in the Uptown on the south side of Bridgeport Road East between King Street North and Regina Street North. The property previously contained a low-rise building owned and occupied by Canada Post Corporation. The building has recently been demolished and the lands are now vacant. There is a significant grade change of approximately 3.8 meters, with the highest point of elevation located in the northwest corner of the site at King and Bridgeport, and the lowest point located in the southeast corner along Regina Street. The lands are in close proximity to Waterloo Public Square Ion Station to the south, and multiple Grand River Transit stops on King Street, Bridgeport Road, and Herb Street. And then surrounding lands are a mix of commercial and residential uses. Next slide, please. In 2018, Council approved Official Plan Amendment 21 and Zoning Bylaw Z1802, which applied to the lands. The applications were intended to facilitate a larger scale development, as can be seen by the slide that's before you. Requests were made at that time as part of the previous applications for additional height and density and were approved subject to Section 37 of the Planning Act. However, the required Section 37 agreement was never executed. Since 2018, the building has been redesigned. Next slide, please. The proposed building is generally the same as what was presented at the informal public meeting in February, with exception to 4 modifications. The non-residential space has been reduced by approximately 520 square meters. The rooftop amenity area is no longer proposed as a privately owned and publicly accessible space, or POPs. The rooftop does remain as part of the proposed redevelopment, but is intended for private use. Parking has increased by 4 spaces, and the last change is that the amenity area on level 1, internal to the building and located at the corner of Bridgeport Road and Regina Street, has been converted to utility room to house hydro infrastructure. So overall, the proposed development now being advanced consists of a 2 to 4 story podium and 1 21-story tower for a total height of 84.5 meters and 25 stories, 243 units or 366 bedrooms, just under 1,300 square meters of non-residential space, 172 parking spaces, and 146 bicycle parking spaces. Next slide, please. So this is a rendering of the concept plan, and it just provides a sense of the overall building footprint, which is the heavy gray line, as well as the tower footprint being the blue dashed line. There are 2 vehicular entrances proposed off of Regina Street. The northerly entrance is intended for visitors and non-residential parking, and the southerly entrance is for residential parking. And there are 2 dots on the east and west facades, just highlighting the primary entrances to the building. Next slide, please. The city's official plan designates the property as commercial and uptown commercial core, and these designations permit the proposed mixed-use development. The lands are also within the Uptown Waterloo Urban Growth Center, or the primary node, which is designed to accommodate a minimum of density of 200 people and jobs per hectare. A portion of the lands adjacent to King Street are designated as Main Street, which permits heights ranging from 6 to 16 meters, and the remainder of the site is designated high density, which provides for a maximum of 81 meters, and the overall density for the entire lands is 750 bedrooms per hectare. Next slide, please. The lands are currently zoned holding Uptown Commercial Core 16 and holding Uptown Commercial Core 81. A site-specific zoning bylaw amendment was approved in 2018, as I previously mentioned, also applies to the lands, which was incorporated into the city's comprehensive zoning bylaw as site exception 215 or C215. And the site-specific bylaw contained various regulations to facilitate the previous development concept as listed on the slide here. Next slide, please. Based on the revised development concept, the applicant is proposing to modify some of the existing zoning regulations, remove some of those regulations that no longer apply, and propose new regulations that are tailored to the revised proposal. So in summary, the zoning bylaw amendment proposes to increase the density from 750 to 855 bedrooms per hectare, which will permit 45 additional bedrooms through Section 37 Planning Act or density bonusing. Reduce the parking requirements for visitors from 0.1 to 0.045 spaces per unit. Reduce the non-residential uses parking regulations from 1.5 to 1.15 spaces per 100 square meters of floor area. And the residential rate at 0.6 spaces per unit is not proposed to change. The applicant is also proposing to reduce the tower step back along Regina Street from 3 to 2 meters, recognize the existing interior lot line tower separation along the southerly lot line of 7.5 meters, and increase the building height of the tower from 25 stories and 81 meters to 25 stories and 84.5 meters for an additional 3.5 meters. Next slide, please. The applicant is also proposing to remove the holding provision, which requires a record of site condition accepted by the province, demonstrated compliance with the ministry noise guidelines, an updated hydrogeological study to the satisfaction of the region, and a loading study to demonstrate loading and unloading requirements for visitors to the site. A Section 37 agreement was required as part of the previous zone change application, but since the development concept has changed as well as the community benefits, the Section 37 agreement is no longer required in the context of this holding provision. As well, the parking study was previously required as the applicant was proposing surplus parking. That is no longer the case, and therefore the study is no longer required. Next slide, please. So after evaluating the application, staff are recommending that the lands be rezoned to Uptown Commercial Core 16 and Uptown Commercial Core 81, removing the holding provision with site-specific provisions. The table in front of you illustrates the zoning requirements and the applicant's proposed zoning regulations shown in gray, as well as the zoning regulations recommended by staff, which are shown in yellow on the right side. And these regulations include a reduction to that tower step back on Regina Street to 2 meters to permit the tower and the podium to align, maximizing parking and addressing structural load. Reinstating the minimum interior lot line tower separation of 7.5 meters to that southerly lot line, which was established through the previous site-specific bylaw. And 2 additional amendments were identified during the application review, which are also being advanced, which includes permission for the parking structure to be constructed slightly closer to King Street, given that the parking garage has been compressed as much as possible, and the site does have its challenges with having 3 frontages. And that the first story height that's within the enclosed parking structure behind the activated spaces along King Street and Regina Street be reduced to accommodate the design of the proposed building. Next slide, please. In terms of density, staff are recommending a maximum of 855 bedrooms per hectare, or the 45 additional bedrooms, subject to the applicant entering into a Section 37 agreement with the city. In exchange for those additional bedrooms, staff are further recommending that the applicant provide community benefits that total collectively $720,000, which would be $16,000 per bedroom, in the form of public art for a value of not less than $150,000 and a contribution of $570,000 to the city's affordable housing grant program. In terms of height, the staff are recommending a maximum of 84.5 meters and keeping it at 25 stories for the additional 3.5 meters of building height, also subject to the Section 37 bonusing agreement. An enhanced design of the podium at the corner of Bridgeport Road and Regina Street is recommended as the community benefit in this case. Next slide, please. In terms of parking regulations, the applicant is proposing 172 parking spaces, which results in 19 fewer spaces than the bylaw requires. Staff supports the reduced parking rate, but are recommending a reduction to the residential parking rate, resulting in 16 fewer residential spaces, and a slight reduction to the visitor parking rate, resulting in 3 fewer visitor spaces. It's further recommended that the half of the visitor parking, or 11 spaces, be allocated to residential visitors, and the other half be non-exclusive spaces, which could be used by residential or non-residential visitors as the needs arise. In staff's opinion, this allows the development to be more responsive to parking demands. Next slide, please. And finally, staff are also advancing a number of site plan directives that were identified during the review of the zoning bylaw amendment, and these include high standard of architecture, urban design, and building materials, considering the fact that the building is in a gateway location, a loading study for launch use should it be pursued, specific design considerations, in particular the blank wall along Bridgeport Road, enhanced facades along Bridgeport and Regina Street, street activation, as well as material cues that are based on the surrounding character. Staff are also recommending a wind study addendum to address the public realm and mitigation as required, signage for the non-exclusive visitor parking spaces, noise mitigation, and sustainable design elements where feasible. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Wendy. An extensive presentation for an extensive project. So very, very good. Very well done. I'll just pause to see if there's any questions of staff at this point. Councillor Bonigar, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thanks, Wendy, for all the work over the last few years, helping kind of bring this along. I appreciate all of the detail that was in the report. It was very helpful. So I'd just like to start just talking about the parking allocation. So yeah, the proposal does seem focused on resident parking, but I have some concerns from the ward perspective. Just the reliance of uptown developments, to rely on city-owned lots for parking. Like that reduces our ability to redevelop those spaces for community benefit in the future, should we wish to. So I really appreciate staff's position on trying to rebalance the parking more towards visitors. I mean, I'm not particularly bothered how that's carved up, but I think overall the weighting looks much better between residential and visitor / non-residential. I was just really curious about how the numbers were arrived at and the ease, because when I was looking at the floor plans, I noticed that there's two different kinds of parking. There's that lower floor where much of the visitor parking is, and then the internal upper floor parking lots, I'm assuming, would be behind some kind of gate. And it looks like there are 47 parking spots on that lower lot. And given that staff's proposal is for 42 visitor spots, the bylaw calls for 45, I was just wondering, was there ever a discussion of simplifying everything and having that lower lot be visitor and the internal upper lots be residential? The numbers look kind of close there, and I just wasn't sure if that had been considered and if it was shot down, or why that's the case.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, there really was a function of making sure that there's sufficient parking for both the residential visitors to the property as well as the commercial visitors to the property. The intent of the applicant, as I understand it, is to eventually propose a condominium for the development, in which case typically the residential uses would be unitized and any visitor parking would be common element. I don't think that there was any discussion to blend the two, but certainly from a bylaw perspective, we keep the two visitor and non-residential parking separate, so to ensure that there is sufficient spaces for both of those types of uses.
I think perhaps I wasn't clear. I meant when you pool the visitor and non-residential parking together, those numbers almost exactly match the parking spots available on that lower level. So I was just wondering if there had been discussion of, I'll ask that for the developer. How about that? I'll set that question aside, and it might be more relevant for the developer. So my next question was just for clarification. So the amenity space on Regina that was originally discussed in the original proposal, and they were talking about kind of 20 years of free use by the arts community, that's the space that's been replaced with hydro infrastructure. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, that is correct. It was part of the previous 2018 community benefit package that was negotiated.
Okay, and can you kind of help us understand why the hydro ended up having to be in that space?
Absolutely. The hydro for the property, there are existing overhead wire lines on the west side of Regina Street and the north side of Bridgeport Road. Waterloo North Hydro intends to maintain the overhead distribution system on Regina Street, but rebuild the Bridgeport Road overhead lines and moving it to the south side of Bridgeport Road. In the case of hydro, they require a minimum under the Ontario Building Code setback of 5 meters from any distribution lines or poles. So that would push the building back. As based on that requirement or possible scenario, the applicant has chosen to bury the hydro in front of the building along both Bridgeport Road and Regina Street. And in doing so, this would require a switchgear room. The switchgear room has to be located close to, in proximity to the intersection, and has to be accessible from the exterior. So looking at where that can be located, it became a bit of a review of internal space. And so the applicant didn't really want to compromise any more parking, and this was the only other alternative that they could consider.
Okay, so it came down to the art space or some parking spaces. Okay, that helps me understand. I'm just, when it comes to the King Street frontage, as you mentioned, the non-residential area has been reduced. I'm just curious at the new size, what other uses would be permitted in that space should launch need to expand or move or something like that in the future?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, there are a series of uses that are proposed, that are permitted in the U1 zone. From my discussions with the applicant, they are very much trying to ensure that launch is successful and populates the space. There has been also some discussion that should it not, offices has been considered, and there could also be other complementary uses such as restaurant or similar uses that are existing in the uptown.
Okay, and if it was office spaces, do you mean that would that be on the second level? Does office space is that consistent with our efforts to have a lively streetscape?
It would be. It would be. Again, it's a use that is contemplated in the zoning, and it would provide for, again, street activation in terms of people populating that area, coming and going, having entrances, windows, all of which contributes to an activated space.
Okay, so thank you, that helps. And my last question for staff is just kind of walking back around the corner now. We're going down to Regina Street. Now, this street, Regina is going to be getting more activity as the core kind of expands laterally. I'm just wondering, how does the proposed frontage along Regina, how does that support the vibrant streetscape that we're trying to build towards on that street?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I think I would start to answer that question by just identifying the fact that there are design challenges that come with a property that has 3 frontages, particularly when you have 2 busy roads, regional roads. Some of the functional aspects of the building are often have to be accommodated, and they often go to the local frontages. So in this case, the design of Regina Street is constrained already in terms of any hydro infrastructure as well. You've got to look at accommodating driveways. I think that said, though, there is still some real possibilities of activating that space, including building the building entrance that leads to a main lobby for the residential building. The applicant's also looking at a 5.4 meter boulevard that is to extend from the interior edge of the sidewalk to the building face. So that will really enhance the public realm in that area. And again, through that Section 37 agreement as recommended by staff, the applicant, we are looking to obtain an enhanced podium design. And one of the purposes of that design would be to address upgraded and high quality streetscapes for that particular corner, Bridgeport and Regina Street, to ensure again that we are obtaining the vibrant streetscapes as intended.
Okay, we're going to stay on that corner just for a bit longer. Now, I remember when this originally came up, some of my fellow councillors were bringing up some really good points just about how wind can move down Bridgeport at times, and as we intensify, that we can end up with inadvertent wind tunnels. I was just wondering if you could give us any information that can help us kind of understand how those sidewalks and how that public space would function and what it would feel like with this new building in place.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, with specifically wind in mind, I think what staff are looking at is a conceptual model of a building, and one of the items that we looked at is we are going to be continuing these redefining or refining, I should say, the design of the building through site plan, and things that we want to see that would help with that wind would be were itemized in the report, and looking at notches and colonnades, projecting elements, canopies, and landscaping that may help to again address that wind or a tunneling effect if you are heading down Bridgeport towards Regina Street. We also did recognize that the wind study did address wind safety impacts, and it was recommended that it was meeting that criteria. However, I think from a public realm perspective, it's why we are looking potentially to recommend to council that there be a wind study addendum to further look at that particular issue relative to the public realm in that particular corner.
That sounds great, and I think it will be much appreciated by the people walking by in years to come. Okay, thank you, Mayor. That's all from me.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions of staff at this time, so I'll move along to delegations, of which we have one set of delegations led by Mr. Trevor Hawkins, MHBC. So let's invite Trevor in, and we'll see how the time is divvied up or how the presentation goes. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Good evening, members of council. We've decided to combine our forces, so myself, Joel Doherty, and Jason Martin will be tag teaming on the presentation so that it's efficient and it doesn't take up too much of council's time. Before we launch into matters, though, I just wanted to touch base that Councillor Bonagor had a question about the delineation of parking between what we would call, say, the lower level and the upper level. The lower level actually does have 42 spaces, which is the same amount of spaces that are noted in the zoning bylaw as being available to non-residential or visitors. So if you're someone coming to the site for that purpose, you would use the northerly entrance. And then if you were coming to the site and you lived in the building, you would use the separate driveway. So they are managed in that manner with those allocations divided in that way. And then I know there was a bit of discussion about the hydro room, and I just wanted to touch on that briefly. So as Wendy alluded to, the hydro is being buried along Bridgeport Road and Regina Street. There are other, so that's a sort of an infrastructure that relates to the project, but also provides hydro services, of course, to other properties, and that's what requires the switchgear room. The building itself, of course, requires its own hydro services. So there's a transformer vault room so that power can get from that outside infrastructure to service this building specifically. And then there's an electrical room that deals with the electrical wiring and et cetera within the building. And Waterloo North Hydro had required that those three spaces be concentrated in one location. And as a result of that direction, it was that part of the building that was really the only space that could accommodate all of those things within proximity to the hydro infrastructure. So I just want to provide a little more context to that. But with that in mind, and we'll go to the next slide, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Doherty.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Great answers. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. As Trevor said, my name is Joel Doherty. I'm with HIP Developments. It's my pleasure to be here this evening and speak to you all. Thank you to Wendy as well for a great presentation and summarizing the application. Thank you. I just really want to spend a moment to highlight our view on the project and how important we feel that it is. It's an extremely important site and project to us, and we view that as also as a very important site and project to the city of Waterloo. We view it as a gateway site. It's your first stop coming into the uptown from Bridgeport. It's at the juncture of major arteries. It's got 3 frontages. So it's important to us that we've got high quality architecture that reflects this location, and we feel MSSA has done a great job in achieving this. It's a tower that's going to be seen on the skyline. It's going to look beautiful on the skyline. We've got an impressive podium with really attention to pedestrian realm and streetscape and activation and as mentioned before, bringing people into the building and into the street and that connection to the street, basically on all sides where possible. We've, since the initial design, we've brought it so that we've got a lower level on King Street, which reflects the height along King, and a spectacular terrace atop that. We took the opportunity to address something we've also seen, I think many of us have seen during the pandemic, and that is that desire to get outside by everyone. It's always been there. I think it's been accentuated over the pandemic. And what we're really finding is people really want that backyard. If they're leaving a house, they really want to maintain a backyard. So by having this on the terrace, and you'll see in the picture there at the top, we've got a very active terrace, full mature trees, walking trails, hammocks, barbecues, fitness area. It's 18,000 square foot area that's really going to be heavily programmed and a great space for everyone in the building to really enjoy. With that as well, the product we've gone with here, it's a great condominium product that's really going to address numerous needs in the marketplace. We've increased the number of 2 bedrooms in the project, giving, again, the downsizers an opportunity to live into something a little bit bigger, a little more functional, but as well, maybe for the young couple that's looking for either their first home, and give them the chance to stay in this building with maybe the first child with that 2nd bedroom. So giving more choice in the marketplace and to people, we've heard that a lot as well as we've had conversations out there in the community. So again, abundance of amenities, both inside and outside, on the same terrace level. We've got that active lobby on Regina, so really important to activate Regina Street as well. And as you see in the bottom image there, that's a split screen of looking cross-sectionally into a unit where you've got this great interior space, heavy millwork included, and really large balconies, large living space for all the units there, as big as 7 feet to 9 feet, almost 10 feet in depth, and 200 square foot balconies. So again, attention to that outdoor space for people and offering people that ability to get outside. And finally, just to wrap it up, this is the opportunity to bring significant intensification. I think we've all decided that we want to curb sprawl wherever we can. So bringing intensification, and this could bring over close to 500 people to live and work downtown in the uptown Waterloo. So we've taken all these considerations, all these items into consideration, and feel we've got a great project here for you. Thank you.
Next slide. So I know Wendy's kind of summarized some of these. I just wanted to illustrate the site specifics. So the top arrow shows where the balcony projects. You can see it's a sort of an undulating balcony, and the closest projection results in a 2-meter step back from the podium. The podium itself has residential units that actually face Regina Street, and those would be the balconies above the podium. So although the request is to reduce from 3 to 2, there's some elements of the podium that would be more than 2 meters, as you can see in that illustration. And then the arrow at the bottom of the screen just shows the tower separation from the tower to the southerly lot line, which is more or less the same as what was previously proposed. And then next slide. This just shows council the cross section. There's some site-specific, very technical regulations that deal with the amount of separation from King Street to where the parking starts. And you can see that you won't be able to see the parking from King Street. It's just because of the road widening, it's slightly less than 15 meters from King Street to where the parking starts. And then the main floor height, you can see how when you're standing on Regina Street, you've got the lobby and a quite high ground floor. But as you move into the interior of the site, the sort of floor to ceiling height of the parking structure is less than 4.5. So that's the nature of that particular site specific request. It's very technical in nature. Next slide. Just going to pass it over to Jason Martin now to talk a little bit about building design.
Hi, Mayor and members of council. If we could just move to the next slide, that would be helpful. And I might ask you to return to the first. It's better to have a sort of an overview of the building to get some basic understanding of the design as it stands. So the podium and tower has been designed in a progressive modern style, similar to the previous concept several years ago. The dominant east and west facades of the tower have been conceived as singular objects with a strong geometric pattern generated by a back and forth scissoring of the balconies. Transparent glass corners separate the east and west facades of the tower, helping to slim the tower itself. Beyond these glass corners, there has been really an effort to minimize the number and complexity of design elements, thus allowing the distinctive shape and geometry of the facades to be the focus. The mechanical penthouse has been deliberately pulled back from the perimeter of the building to further strengthen the strong, singular, highly articulated facade. And viewed from different points in the city, the tower's geometry and its interaction with light throughout the day will make the tower visible, visually dynamic, distinctive, and I think recognizable. Scale and massing, material selection, fenestration, proportions of the podium have been balanced to help reinforce this progressive architectural vision for the project on the block and in this neighborhood. The commercial space on King has been designed with subtle shaping of its massing and a simple selection of materials to generate a very dynamic architectural statement and vision for the King and Bridgeport intersection and gateway. If we could move back one slide, that'd be great. Thank you. The podium, there's a variety of materials are being considered for the podium, including architectural concrete, metal panel, glass, large format stone, all of which are being thoughtfully combined to create a unified image for the podium, but to provide the flexibility to respond to the different functional requirements that we have at each street edge. As Wendy mentioned, there are 3 street edges. So, Regina, we have a residential frontage. Bridgeport, we have a transportation corridor or frontage. And on King, we have a commercial frontage. And I'll pass it back to Trevor.
Thank you, Jason. Next slide, please. After that one. There we go. I think I just wanted to summarize, and one thing we did want to perhaps raise with council relates to the Section 37 agreement. The way it's worded now, it would require that the developer provide a minimum of 150,000 in public art. And one matter we had raised with council, and it wasn't, or with Wendy, and unfortunately not in time for her to include in her report, was whether that wording could be modified to say up to 150,000 in public art, and that would allow HIP developments to provide more funding towards affordable housing and less towards public art, if that was something that was worked out through the Section 37 agreement, rather than obligating those 2 hard numbers. Otherwise, we're certainly happy to proceed with the recommendations that staff has advanced. Thank you, Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you, Trevor and Joel and Jason, for that good, succinct teamwork presentation. I'll just pause for a moment while we see if there's questions of your team, although you did answer a couple of the questions ahead of time. And I'll turn over to Councillor Bonigar. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And first up, thanks, Trevor. You knocked 2 of the questions off the list straight off the bat and did it so succinctly. So thank you so much. I think we've seen these plans morph and change, from 2017 to 2018, and now this redesign that's in front of us here. I think the whole story reflects the tumult of the last few years. The development has lost some of the additional retail space. The launch space is a bit smaller. That arts space, had to make way for the realities of hydro. So there've been some difficult decisions along the way, but it still manages to be quite lovely. And what you've brought here, it fits well within the streetscape of King. It sits, it fits well within the zoning on Regina, and it keeps that broad skyscape that we have in the uptown, thanks to those King Street height restrictions. So I can see as it's developed the things that have been gained, the things that have been lost. But with all of that in the background, I can still appreciate what you've brought in front of us today. So I have a few questions. First of all, I'm hoping to talk about the King Street frontage. In the pictures that were in your filings and in the presentation tonight, that's public, the non-residential use, the launch space, it does look rather open and lovely, almost like a gallery. I'm just wondering how it is proposed to function for something like launch, which might also need some storage files and some workspaces and things that aren't always pretty and people don't always want to have on display. Can you give us an idea of just how flexible those spaces are?
Well, thank you, Mayor Jaworski, and through you to Councillor Bonagor, and certainly Jason knows probably far more than I do about the intricacies of the interior design of the building. But I don't know that at this point in time, when you have a non-residential floor area and you don't have a user that's perhaps designed the interior of that space to sort of specify where they do and don't want things, we can say with any certainty specifically where things will go. But I do know that there is some space in the underground, so to speak, level of parking where there are storage possibilities. There's two spaces really in that area that could be made available for the non-residential user to provide them with that flexibility.
Okay, it sounds like I might be a little bit ahead of the game right now. So I look forward to seeing how that gets worked out with the tenant that does come in. As I'll ask you the question that I had asked Wendy before, but in a different way. So should things change in the future, and should launch move, or should something happen to prevent them from coming here in the first place, are there some alternate kinds of business or uses that the developer kind of has in mind for that space? I'm just really asking for consideration of the liveliness of the King Street streetscape.
Certainly, and I think just to sort of add to how Wendy answered the question, the proponent is certainly excited and supports launch and has for many years. In the event that launch doesn't occupy the space or does and then leaves because they become too big for it, as you said, the U1 zone does permit quite a broad range of commercial uses, and the space is flexible in the sense that you could have different users on different floors. So you could have supporting restaurant uses or retail uses on the ground floor, and then you could have office on floors 2 and 3, for example. So it does lend itself to being able to respond, and that was purposely the case. Is that the proponent, HIP Developments, is aware that nothing is guaranteed in life, and certainly not in real estate. And so they wanted to make sure that the space could be flexible and adjust as things in the marketplace adjust. So it could be used for any number of those things.
Okay, that's heartening to hear. Looking at the apartment size, I mean, you noted that a lot of the units are 2 bedrooms. I think this is much needed. It's very much appreciated as an addition to uptown developments. And, you know, it's a small step towards providing more options in the market. So I think that's a pivot that's going to be appreciated. Given the number of apartments in the building, I'm curious about the bicycle parking that you have on the list. So I noticed there's 146 bike parking allocations. I'm just curious, again, kind of if things change in the future, that idea of flexibility, if there's an increase in demand from the residents in the building, particularly given how centrally located this is and how many trails it's close to, are there spaces that are envisioned to be flexible or to possibly provide more bike parking in the future should it be needed? Is that something already on the radar?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bonagor. So in addition to the dedicated and specific bike parking within the building, there are a substantial number of storage lockers, which are even larger than a bike parking space. So there's certainly flexibility for someone who maybe doesn't have a bike parking space. They could store their bike within their storage locker, park it there, store it there for the winter, for example, something of that nature. So there is an ability for individual unit owners to locate their bicycle if they don't have one of the spaces that are specifically allocated for that purpose.
Okay, that sounds promising. And my other question is really regarding the podium rooftop. I'm a little bit relieved to see that it's not being put forward as a public park, given it wouldn't have met our parkland policy parameters. How's that for some alliteration tonight? But it still does promise to be a really rather interesting space. And I know when you were here last, you spoke of that front part where there's the concrete seating and that little strip of green as holding potential for non-residential use. I'm just wondering, do you still see it that way? And do you see it as being potentially usable by Launch during their summer camps, or as a space that could be booked by community groups to hold, like, you know, I'm thinking things like the Little Theatre holding a summer play series or anything like that. Is that something that's in the realm of consideration at the moment, or is that still just got a big TBD next to it?
Well, I'll start off, and I think I'll let Mr. Doherty jump in too. I think there's two parts to your question. There's the one part is, would that rooftop amenity space be available for whoever occupies the non-residential space? I think that was one part of your question. And then the other part was a slight variation on that, and would that space be able to be booked by groups? So I view those as two separate questions, and I think I'll let Mr. Doherty answer those.
Thank you, Trevor, and through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. Yes, you're correct. I mean, we made the changes as a result of kind of what we were hearing before on the POPs. Right now, the focus has been on that private terrace, and we've left that front, I don't want to say blank. I think that's probably an overstatement, but you know, consideration for future, yes, we can look at what that could mean. If launch does happen, yes, part of their programming did want use of that terrace, so I think that would remain there if launch does go ahead. As far as renting for community groups, I guess I'd be curious to explore that down the road, just in light of the hesitation for POPs usage there. So at this point, you know, we can engage in future discussions, but it's designed to be a private terrace and used by the non-res use as well at the front. Thank you.
Oh, great. Sorry, I didn't mean to muddy the waters there. Yeah, my main question was regarding the non-residential uses, and then I just started riffing. So apologies.
Okay.
But no, like, I think that's really, because, you know, there is a lot of potential there, and I can imagine, you know, with launch in there flourishing and the weather is great and they have hordes of children with smelly feet, they might want to go upstairs, says the parent. So that's all my questions for the delegates, Mayor. I do have one question for staff as a follow-up to a point they raised. I can ask that now or wait. It's up to you.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, so why don't you go ahead, continue on, please. Thank you.
Okay, so for staff, just to address the question that Mr. Hawkins kind of brought up at the end regarding the amount for public art, is that something that we could consider, and would it be a case of public art up to 150,000 for a total accumulated amount of X? Is that how it could potentially work?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yes, it certainly could work that way. It is definitely in council's purview to make that change and that consideration to be, as long as the collective value of the uplift is equals or equivalent to $720,000.
Okay, and my only, I mean, I think it's an idea that warrants consideration by council, but my only concern would be at the informal, we did have a delegate raise the idea of using public art or some kind of art to really liven up the Bridgeport facade of the building. And I think that was an idea that was certainly worth considering. So I suppose while I'm open to this idea, I would want to know, is $150,000 going to get us very far in terms of public art as it is? Could we still get what we want in terms of, the bringing public art to that location with a lower amount? If I could get a little bit of input from staff on that, that would help.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, certainly the city has collected on other sites for public art. It really varies in terms of what is to be proposed and where. I know as part of the original application back in 2018, launch was considered at that time, and the art that was considered as part of that development was a series of sculptures as airplanes to be connected to the side of the building. Art can be expensive as well as getting into any structural art. So I do caution in terms of the value that would be reduced to a point where, if it's a lesser amount, then we may want to, or council may consider capping what that lesser amount would be. And perhaps others in the corporation who have had a little bit more history with the art projects brought forward could comment on the value that council may want to consider.
And maybe we just want to leave it in the hands of staff, Councillor Bonagor, where if we say up to, staff may decide at the end of the day that the right number is as low as 145, and we just stay out of it and so we sort of accommodate the flexibility, but the decision making is still in staff's hands.
Yeah, that sounds good. I just want to make sure we don't lose that total amount of X. I want to make sure we're still keeping whole.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's what I heard from Wendy, is that we would still stay whole. It just gives planning staff the flexibility to move some dollars over here and some dollars over there.
That would be correct.
Yeah.
That's all for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Vasek, please go ahead. Oh, I wonder if your sound system is having troubles, Councillor Vasek.
Now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, it's weird. Such a strange. Okay. Through you, Mayor Jaworski, just a follow up on the art piece, since arts and culture staff aren't here tonight. Would planning staff be working with arts and culture team through the process to sort of gauge their perspective on the amount that should go there based on what's been based on the ideas that you're wanting to put forward? Or I just want to make sure arts and culture staff are involved.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, certainly it is the way in which the recommendations is structured would be that art is provided, and if the applicant has the choice of providing a certain amount of dollars in terms of a financial contribution, or working with staff and the arts and culture staff in particular to arrive at an agreeable public art in a satisfactory location. So they have the choice of either or.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So, but you did say in there that arts and culture staff will be involved. Yes, you said them specifically. Did I miss that right, or get it right?
No, that's correct.
Cool. Great. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Wendy.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of our delegate? Hearing none. Yeah, so what we can do is I can call this meeting to a close. There's no further, nobody's been calling in? Okay, one moment. As the clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. And so I'll perhaps turn over to Ward Councillor to see where we go with respect to the recommendation, and if you want to consider the flexibility of art as the delegate requested.
We would just amend, it'd be number 3 amended.
So to be honest, I'm happy to move that. I would just, does that work for staff? I think I'm just going to ask one last time. Does it help or hinder to have that flexibility?
You, Mayor Jaworski, I think again, having the ability or the changing the wording would be fine in terms of providing that additional flexibility and leaving it in staff's hands if that is what council is comfortable with.
I'm comfortable moving that forward then, yes, Mayor. Do we need to make that statement in what I'm about to read out later?
Yeah. Just one moment. We're just going to confer here on what a little bit of wording might need in this recommendation, item 3. One moment.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Bonnegar. What I would suggest is that you use the wording that has been provided for moving the motion, and with the exception that recommendation 3 would the last sentence, it would say attached to report IPPW 2022-042 as Appendix F as amended to provide an upset contribution. And I'm just flipping screens to go to what section F says. So instead of having in 3.1, currently A and B are defined amounts, and so I think that you could remove A and B. So 3.1, Appendix F 3.1 be amended to provide a combined amount of $720,000 towards affordable housing and public art. I think that would meet your intention, and we can work on that for the minutes.
Okay, so and it's a combined amount of $720,000. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, we just had to switch our. Sorry, we had to switch our sounds. Did you want to say that again, Councillor Bonnegar?
Sorry, I'm just making notes while you were right. I just want to make sure I'm getting the correct combined amount of $720,000 for affordable housing and public art.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So do you want me to read this out now then, Mayor? As the motion?
Yeah, hold on, I'm just switching. We always have to switch the volume controls in here. It's like a, anyway, I don't know what it's like. It's problematic. How about that? Okay, let's go ahead with the moving of the motion. Please go ahead, Councillor Bonagor.
Okay, so I'm moving the motion to approve. So whereas Council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas Council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that Council approve report IPPW 2022-042, that Council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z2202, which is 2422409 Ontario Inc. for 70 King Street North, as set out in section 7 of report IPPW 2022-042, and that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to execute a section 37 planning act agreement between 2422409 Ontario Inc., known as HIP Post LP, and the Corporation of the City of Waterloo for the lands known municipally as 70 King Street North, in a form that is substantially consistent with the bonusing provisions contained in the site-specific zoning bylaw amendment attached to report IPPW 2022-042, known as Appendix F, with 3.1 to be amended to provide a combined amount of $720,000 for affordable housing and public art, and for this to be executed to the satisfaction of the city's Director of Planning and the city solicitor.
Sounds good. Is there Bill 73 wording too, or is that all it?
Yeah.
Is that all of it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. What a journey. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henry. And I'll just see if there's any debate. Hearing none, let's do the voting beginning with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously with Councillor Freeman off due to a pecuniary interest. And with that, congratulations to the team and to MHBC and especially HIP Developments and the architects as well for all their work on this over the past so many number of years I can't even remember, but certainly a great signature project for Uptown Waterloo. And it took a while to get there, but I think it takes a while to get things right, particularly at such a substantial, iconic location, King and Bridgeport. So with that, thank you all very much. And now we'll invite Councillor Freeman back to the council table, the virtual council table. We'll just see if Councillor Freeman is back. If you could test your mic, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm here, Mayor.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, one moment. We move on to staff reports, item 15A, and it's an affordable housing funding request. Parkwood Mennonite Home, 730 New Hampshire Street. A report prepared for us by Joel Cotter. I do believe that Parkwood Mennonite's on the line. Should we have any questions? I might look to, Councillor Freeman already has her hand up. I'll look to Councillor Freeman. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through Mayor Jaworski, I'd like to move this motion. And I see that Councillor Vasic has seconded it, so maybe I can vote on it too. And I just wanted to, again, say something similar to what I said this morning. I wanted to thank staff and Parkwood for bringing this forward. I know that they have really worked hard to secure funding through CMHC, through the region of Waterloo, and staff have been instrumental in helping to advance the planning applications to assist with this going forward. It's a fantastic addition to both the city and Ward 4, and the inclusion of affordable housing for seniors is a much needed addition. So I'm really excited to move this motion, and thank you again to staff for bringing it forward, and I vote in favor.
And we'll just pause voting for a second as we do have a question from Council. Councilor Henry, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly, it's not unusual for us to provide support in this fashion. This is sort of our old way of doing it, which we're getting in before we start our new way of doing it with the grant program this fall. But what is unusual is, in effect, to be allocating dollars not received for projects that may or may not proceed, for which we'd have to deal with that if that came true. But I was wondering if Mr. Cotter could sort of assist me in understanding sort of the cash flow, timing between Parkwood and the city under sort of this proposed arrangement, given the timing of sort of fees and charges that we sort of levy, the uncertain timing around when we can advance cash back in the other direction. I'm sort of cognizant that nonprofit providers' cash on hand can be a challenge in running through these sorts of systems, and I want to make sure we've thought of that and recognize that we've got some we might have to step up at some point along this if the cash that we're promising here coming from somebody else doesn't actually show up in our coffers.
You, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Henry. It's an excellent question, and yes, we've given it some thought in terms of the approach. We know that Council has directed staff to prioritize affordable housing, and we have seen recently 2 proposals come forward. One on May 30th for the Batavia Street project and the 70 King project tonight. Both of which were looking for density, and both of which were contemplating contributions to affordable housing. At the same time, we've got 2 requests for affordable housing funding coming forward, and we know that both of the development applications are wanting to move very quickly through the development process. So we did believe that there was some alignment there, that as we work to finalize the Parkwood project here, we're getting close to finalizing site planning and a number of the other development components to move that project forward. At the same time, we're getting very close on the Batavia project to moving that through site plan approval. And I understand the HIP Developments group wants to move their application forward very quickly. So the way this has been structured is that upon receipt of the monies from those developments, we would then transfer funds through to Parkwood. In the event there is a delay, though, we would report back to council. For example, if these projects aren't moving in the way that staff anticipated, we would likely report back to council in September with a potential alternative funding strategy. But we believe these are going to move fairly quickly, and we think there's alignment there, and that's the reason we've structured the reports in this somewhat unconventional way.
Thanks, Joel. That's useful news around the Batavia project. I know we've had some projects along Albert Street languish, and so that was always my concern. Just in terms of coming back to council in September, I'm sort of curious if sort of approval of this kind of recommendation tonight is effectively us budgeting it while we are still allowed to budget it, and if it needs to come from a different source rather than the source we're allocating tonight, whether that's still something we're allowed to do in the early fall.
Yeah, it's a good question. We would have to certainly work through with finance on that, but the most logical source in my mind would be the affordable housing grant money that is already kind of in the possession of the city intended for affordable housing. So I would hope that council would be able to activate that money, but certainly if we see any issues, we would report back to council with a recommendation and try and strategize how to move the funds forward as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Joel. Without being a lawyer, that sounds like an approach that would work. I appreciate the detail.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Cotter. And with that, we'll look to re-kick off the voting at Ward with Councillor Bassick, please.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
And Mayor Jaworski's in favor too. That's a good day. And the day just gets better with item 15B. Affordable housing funding request, Regional Municipality of Waterloo, 555 Beechwood Drive. Report prepared for us by Mr. Cotter. I'll just look to council to see what hands go up. And I have Councillor Hanmer prepared to move this with a comment. Please go ahead and tell us more about why you like it, Councillor Hanmer. Have a second.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I really like this one for a whole host of reasons, but most importantly for this evening, it's the culmination of a really tremendous process and partnership that the city has had with the region to move this particular project forward. There's been lots of work with the developer. There's been lots of work with staff at both the region and the city, as well as opportunities for the community to have some input into some of the pieces of the development project. So I think it's gone a long way in moving affordable housing within Ward 1 and within the city further. So I like the creative way that we're looking at funding this. And I just wanted to do a shout out and a thank you to the staff, specifically Michelle Lee, who's been really navigating and moving this one forward and keeping on in touch with everything as it's progressed to this stage. And I'm really looking forward to it moving to the next stage. So I am happy to move this particular recommendation.
Excellent. And we have a seconder in Councillor Henry, and I'll make a comment afterwards, but let's begin the vote with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That passes unanimously. You know, I think this is certainly an historic night in terms of having two projects come to us, have two big projects come to us, one on the east side, one on the west side, and an historic investment by the city of Waterloo in housing in our community. And I think that's just a wonderful way to end this meeting, to make such a big contribution, knowing that there's so much need in our community amongst people in general and seniors, and I think that this couldn't be a better way of investing money. So thank you to the planning staff, finance staff, everybody who's involved in this, and thank you to the ward councillors, I know, and all councillors for being so involved in these projects. I think it's really a real thank you to everyone on the line here today. With that, we do move along. Skipping along till I see something interesting, and the one that leaps out to me is questions. Does any councillor have formal questions they wish to pose to staff? Councillor Veith, I'm not sure if that's new business or questions, but I'll ask you to.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either.
Okay, go ahead. Either way, new business is next. You go ahead.
It's kind of new business and just kind of a question for probably you and for Tim. So this weekend I was so lucky to be invited as a guest to a dinner in Niagara Falls that was by the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. They're having their conference there. And this organization deals with protection and restoration of the ecosystem of the Great Lakes and all the waterways that feed into the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence. So cities or communities that are involved typically are, they're on bodies of water. And I noticed when I looked at the list that Kitchener and Waterloo or the region of Waterloo were not on the list, although I did meet a staff person from the city of Kitchener at the dinner. So I just was wondering if, because now the city of Waterloo, is on the Grand River, and there's so much going on with protection and preserving land around the Grand River, that maybe it's something that the region, or maybe even just the city of Waterloo, might be interested in learning about or joining, or maybe we already do. I don't know. Maybe there are staff at the city in water that are involved with this organization, but just putting that out there for you or Tim to comment maybe, or to investigate. Thanks.
I'll comment first and redirect this to Tim.
Thanks, Mayor and Councillor Veith. No, great. Thanks for raising it. I think we all have a vested interest in the Great Lakes and their success going forward. Leave that one with me. It's not a familiar membership for the City of Waterloo, but we do have our CAO meetings regularly that includes all the municipalities in the region. And let me do a little bit of an exploration on that and follow up. Thank you.
That would be great. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Certainly from a regional standpoint, we're responsible for taking water from the depths of the earth, and then taking it from the river and putting it back in the river. So it seems like some connection to Lake Erie for us. With that, I will move on to new business, and I will just look to Councillor Hanmer up first. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to share again, and it's kind of fitting with school ending last week and this week, the celebration that I was able to participate regarding the School Travel Plans Awards. It was fun celebrating with all the parents, students, teachers, community members, and municipal staff who are working hard together to change the way students travel to and from school. It's no small task to plan, coordinate, recruit, supervise, and support the many, many activities that go into creating the school travel plans. And Jenny is very instrumental from the city staff in making sure that this is working for our City of Waterloo schools. It was exciting to see that for the city, we had 13 schools that are participating in the program so far, and we have 3 that are in the championship category. I did share the information with council, but I'd also like to just do for our record a shout out to the staff, students, and parents at Edna Stabler, Elizabeth Ziegler, Laurelwood, McGregor, Our Ladies of Lourdes, St. Nicholas, Millen Woods, St. Luke, Vista Hills, St. Agnes, Mary Johnson, St. Matthew, and the only high school that received, or secondary school that received an award, was Waterloo Collegiate Institute. So congratulations and thank you for everyone who's making wheeling and walking to work, a work to school, a more positive experience in a direction that we're heading in. Thank you.
Excellent, Councillor Hanmer. Certainly, I think all of us care about our students getting to school safely and environmentally friendly. So excellent to bring this up. Next up, I have Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just wanted to make a shout out to the Eastbridge Neighborhood Association, who held an event, a family event in Eastbridge Green. It was wonderful. It's the first event the neighborhood association's been able to host like that post-COVID. It was really well attended, and we recognized volunteers who have donated over 20 years of their time. Cindy Watkin was 20 years, and there was several members that were 5 and 10 years, and several members who were contributing to both the community garden in Haida Park as well as the neighborhood association. So I just wanted to shout out to kind of all the volunteers. It was a reminder that day of how much programming that volunteers delivered to the city, and that we couldn't possibly backfill any of that volunteerism in an affordable way. And I just wanted to say it was really a great event.
I saw the pictures online. Did look great. So unfortunately, I was out of town. It was always a fun time at the Eastbridge events. That's for sure. While we're under new business, I think we as council owe a shout out to staff for helping us pull so many things into all of the June meetings from the summer, and to get her done, so to speak. So efficiently in the June timeframe. We've had big meetings, had a big meeting today, but lots accomplished today. And I really like to pass or tip our caps to all the team members under Mr. Anderson for helping us get things done so quickly and efficiently, and being done before 8 o'clock tonight. So Tim, shout out to your entire team for helping get everything done in June, and so maybe we can have a bit of a peaceful summer for staff who certainly well deserve it for getting us through the past 2.5 years. I don't see any further new business, but we do have our biggest set of bylaws to enact, and I know Councillor Freeman wants to move them as amended tonight in items J, or during the council meeting today. Items J, M, G, N, and T all have been amended by council slightly today. And with that, oh, sorry, did I miss Councillor Henry's new business? Back to new business, and then we'll come back to the bylaws.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Bodley. I think you were so focused on business and on sort of transacting it in your comments. It was easy to sort of jump ahead. I wanted to just pause and mark sort of the occasion of this run of meetings we've had ending here in June, noting that well, we will be meeting again a few times in the fall. The substantive business of this council really concludes tonight, and I wanted to just make sure that we all noted that as we went into the summer, that it's been a huge lift. It's been a huge lift for everybody inside the city and the community to bring forward all of the business of the community through council, and secure our support for being able to move forward and allow us to provide that support to move so many items forward, including affordable housing tonight, and parks, and just so many other items that it's going to be different in the fall, and it's going to be different after the fall. And I wanted us to take just a moment to pause and thank not just Tim and through Tim the staff, but each other for coming at these decisions with open arms, with open hearts, and with open eyes around what's possible. And I've just been incredibly impressed with what we've been able to get done as a council over the last 3.5 years. And there's limited business we have left before us, and so I thought tonight would be a good occasion to just start marking that, and having us think through just what this experience has meant for all of us, and I hope for the community that occasionally listens in, slightly more occasionally is able to read up on what's going on, and certainly all of which are able to benefit from the leadership of what this council and staff have done, and all of the councils that have come before. So I just wanted to take a moment to to recognize that before we moved on to the hotly contested who gets to enact which bylaws, except not those bylaws because we changed them.
Exactly, because there's still more to do. There's still more to do. With that, we will look to enacting the bylaws. As I mentioned, we amended J, M, G, and T, and we'll move those as amended. And I know Councillor Freeman moved it, but I don't know if I had a seconder. Councillor Hanmer. With that, I can't imagine there's any debate. We'll do the vote, beginning with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
The mayor's in favor too. That's good. We have bylaws so staff can do a bunch of work on the city's behalf. And with that, we have a mover for adjournment in Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Henry. We'll do the voting beginning with Ward 1, please.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor's in favor too. See many of you in person at the Jazz Fest. All the best.
Good night.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night, all.
Yeah.